Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Good afternoon and good morning wherever you are. Thank you for joining us in this session in person and online. I would like to kindly ask all of you to mute your cell phones, laptops, and tablets. Thank you very much. We will start the workshop with welcome remarks. For that, I would like to kindly ask Dr. Jonas Adaye Adeto, Director of the Institute for Peace and Security Studies at Addis Ababa University. Dr. Jonas, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Excellencies, dignitaries, honorables, and all protocols observed. So, brothers and sisters, very warm welcome to all of you for this extremely interesting and unique event under the title Emerging Dynamics in Peace Operation in Africa. I really found the very theme to be very timely, simply because if we take three situations now here as we speak, what's happening at global level, global security context, our continent's security context, even locally while we are sitting here, what's going on in Ethiopia as well, or Horn of Africa in general. So when we look at this very closely, the global security dynamics shows us that almost new colonialism is coming back. Go my way. My way is superhighway, or you are wrong. The best example is Afghanistan. After 20 years, what happened? It must really send a lasting lesson to the entire international community that if we don't understand the dynamism of context and culture and people, if we don't respect each and every member countries of the United Nations, then we must be prepared to reap the outcome of what we are doing. I'm sure no one is enjoying, like Hollywood film, what's happening by looking at what's happening in Afghanistan. It should tell us what's meant by top-down peace building. I know it all. One size fits all approach, how dangerous it is. Coming back to our continent again, we can see different conflicts, violent conflict, mainly, of course, internal conflict. What's happening in Guinea, in Ethiopia, in Western Africa and Sahel countries, in Mozambique? If you just assess very quickly, we can see how internal conflict with international dimension is again almost destabilizing Africa. It really makes us to focus mainly, as I have identified, what is now and what will come next. So how prepared should we be? Should we always look at governments, or should think tanks and academia also contribute concretely to the policy understanding before they devising these mechanisms, such as we can see here, health, development, peace nexus? How much important they really are when you are engaging people in the peacekeeping aspect. As someone who has been engaged in peacekeeping activities, in training, in teaching, and observing, when they come back, how they really are sometimes stressed with this post-traumatic distress syndrome, how much they really are suffering by living the past. And that has never been taken into account. They were not keeping the peace of the peacekeepers. So definitely that really makes this event particularly unique. And for that, I think I should congratulate KATPC for an excellent innovative approach to peacekeeping and peace building. The third point I want to focus on is what should we do rather than really pointing our fingers at others. We as think tanks, of course, think tanks, but also do tanks as well. What can we do? Not only think. Well, how can we walk the talk that we are producing for others? I think such findings, such cooperation across the continent without looking for global north to come and help global south. But how can we engage the global north as well as global south together, make our continent, our earth more peaceful for the entire humanity? Because for us, peace is indivisible. Security is indivisible. What happened in Afghanistan, as we will see in the next as the time unfolds, the effect is quite clear. Because some 20, 30 years ago, what happened, some 21 years ago, what happened in Uganda, in Afghanistan, the poverty level, the insecurity causing 9/11 in Washington, D.C., what's called butterfly effect. So that's why the peace is indivisible. That's why we can see GIZ working closely with IPSS, closely with KATPC, so as to prevail peace. So, thank you, organizers. Thank you, our partners. Thank you for your commitment. I'm sure we are expecting more yet to come, particularly in keeping the peace of peacekeepers. And at the same time, how we can be innovative, how we can contribute more positively, and at the same time engage very amicably with policymakers as well, so that we can have the Agenda 2063, of course, translated into actually the Africa we want coming out, or 2030 of that the UN Sustainable Development being practiced. These, I'm sure, could quite clear the ground. In the coming then hours, we are going to have that dynamic engagement in our discussions and deliberations. And I'm sure you will get engaged into it, produce more ideas. We're not telling knowledge, but we are innovating knowledge, creating knowledge. So we'll see that knowledge creation process or co-creation process at the same time. Wishing us all the best. Let me say thank you very much again, and God bless you abundantly.
Dr. Jonas, thank you very much for the welcome remarks. We'll now move to the first opening remarks. I would like to invite Major General Francis Ofori, Commandant at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping and Training Center. Major, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Well, as a co-organizer, permit me to not to make reference to existing protocols, but to address the high table. Excellency, Madam Hannah Tete, the United Nations United Nations Special Representative or Secretary General to African Union and Head of United Nations Office to the AU, Mr. Kwesi Apietu Asante, Deputy Head of Mission, Ghana Embassy representing Ambassador, Mr. Zinurin Agali, Chief Policy Development Unit, Peace Support Operations Division of AU, representing the Commissioner Political Affairs, Peace and Security of AU, the Director, Institute for Peace and Security Studies, IPSS, of the Addis Ababa University, Dr. Jonas Adai Adeto, Your Excellency Heiko Nitschke, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Federal Republic of Germany to Ethiopia, heartily welcome. Excellencies and participants here in person, as well as those joining us virtually, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure and great honor for me to be here this afternoon at the Sheraton Hotel for the official opening ceremony for this particular workshop under the theme, Emerging Dynamics in Peace Operations in Africa. On behalf of the Governing Board, Executive Management Committee, and staff of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, I wish to extend a sincere felicitation to you all. Peacekeeping has evolved over the years and continues to evolve, particularly due to the changing nature of conflicts on the continent. Now, to respond to the changing nature of conflicts, two approaches: the humanitarian development peace nexus, or HDP nexus, also referred to as the triple nexus, and the mental health and psychosocial support of peace operations, MHPSS, have been developed to ensure effective peace operations. Now, during the maiden edition of the Kofi Annan International maiden Kofi Annan Peace and Security Forum, CAPS Forum, in Accra in September 2019, under the theme, Peace Operations in the Context of Violent Extremism in Africa, participants highlighted the glaring lack of linkages between various actors working in fragile countries where there are large-scale peace missions. This clearly amplifies the existing concern in the several factors in the humanitarian, development, and peace sectors work in distinct and in siloed approach that fails to provide a holistic and durable solution in countries facing complex crises. The Humanitarian Development Peace, or HDP Nexus, introduced in the context of the 2016 World Humanitarian Summit, sought to show a new way of working within the context of peacekeeping missions that provides a pathway to bridge the gaps between three traditionally distinct areas of crisis intervention. The United Nations ongoing reform process envisions UN entities working in humanitarian, development, and peace realms to work more cohesively together, capitalizing on their respective comparative advantages. And for me, having read or listened to what has happened in Afghanistan, don't be surprised that when Afghanistan comes to be reviewed, HDP Nexus will feature highly in that particular review. Mental health and psychosocial support in peace support operation, on the other hand, has also become very important in peacekeeping as it seeks to address fundamental individual and collective well-being factors, which are key to the overall initiation, development, maintenance, and sustenance of a peace culture. And again, let me underline the fact that having served in Sarajevo in 1992, I can attest to the need for mental health and psychosocial issues. The principles of mental health and psychosocial support are in tandem with the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The KATPC, as part of its training processes, attaches a lot of importance to these two new approaches to peacekeeping and incorporated them into its training portfolio. In line with this, and through GIZ support, a study was commissioned which revealed the need for flexible and context-specific application of the HDP Nexus across Africa's context of peace operations. Also, a recently conducted baseline study on the need for mental health and psychosocial support for peace operations, training for peace support operations, and humanitarian assistance for personnel highlights important new evidence about the stress faced before, during, and after deployment. This report clearly points to the fact that at present there are no publicly available guidelines or regulations for ECOWAS or African Union, African Union and ECOWAS peacekeeping missions on matters such as staff care, psychosocial support for deployed personnel, or indeed MHPSS challenges MHPSS challenges impact on post-conflict reconstruction efforts. The KIPTC believes that beyond incorporating these two new approaches into its trainings, there's a need for a broader stakeholder conversation which focuses on enhancing the implementation of the HDP and MHPSS concepts within the context of peacekeeping. It is in view of this that the Center has collaborated with the Institute for Peace and Security Studies, IPSS, to organize this workshop to provide a platform to understand the dynamics of the triple nexus and MHPSS in Africa and the specific role national and regional actors can play in ensuring sustainability. It is my hope that our engagement here today will contribute largely to our commitments in ensuring greater implementation of the HDP Nexus and the MHPSS concepts in peacekeeping missions. We are privileged this afternoon to have experts who will guide us in the discourses. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to take this opportunity to thank all of you for making time to participate in this discussion despite your busy schedules. I also wish to thank GIZ for the support, or the continuous support to the Center to ensure sustainable peace and security on the continent. To our team of experienced experts, I thank you for accepting our invitation to be part of this workshop and to wish all of us a lively and enriching exchange of ideas. I thank you for your attention.
Major General Francis Ofori, thank you very much. For the second opening remarks, I would like to invite Mr. Heiko Nitschke, apologies if I misspell your name, the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Federal Republic of Germany to Ethiopia. You have the floor, please, Mr. Heiko.
pronounced it perfectly, so no worries. Excellencies, distinguished guests and participants, all protocol observed. On behalf of the German government, I would like to congratulate the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, the Institute for Peace and Security Studies, and GIZ for their remarkable partnership for sustainable peace in Africa. Today's workshop is yet another proof of this excellent collaboration. Germany has been at the forefront of promoting the humanitarian development and peace nexus, including through the OECD Development Assistance Committee. Our aim is to foster multi-sectoral coherence, big words, to bridge unnecessary barriers and avoid silo working and duplication of efforts, especially in societies where meaningful and holistic change are most needed. We are also a strong advocate of the Grand Bargain launched at the 2016 World Humanitarian Summit. This unique agreement between major donors and humanitarian organizations aims at fostering the HDP nexus by improving effectiveness of humanitarian action. Ladies and gentlemen, mental health and psychosocial needs are a vital part of all our lives. They are even more pertinent for people living through crisis, shocks, and unprecedented change, including the current COVID-19 pandemic. This is why Germany supports various projects focusing on mental health and psychosocial support with the aim of ensuring individual and collective well-being. Peace practitioners around the world encounter numerous stressful and potentially traumatic events. The rates of post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health issues appear to be higher among personnel deployed to peace operations than in the general population. And yet, insufficient attention is being paid to this issue thus far. It is imperative that the particular needs of mission personnel be recognized before, during, and after deployment. Ladies and gentlemen, for several years now, Germany, through GIZ, has been collaborating with the Kofi Annan Training Center and IPSS to convene training courses and policy dialogues to enhance the work of peace practitioners in fragile and conflict-affected countries in Africa. As a result, the Kofi Annan Training Center, in collaboration with the African Union and ECOWAS, offers 2 training courses on the HDP nexus and mental health issues. Similarly, the GIZ APSA project and the AU Commission are collaborating to strengthen psychosocial services in the Lake Chad Basin, as an example. In closing, let me stress that today's workshop provides us with a unique platform to dig deeper into these issues and to define our common responsibilities to promote holistic peace in fragile communities. Our goal should be to suggest actionable steps for international, regional, and national stakeholders to influence and create meaningful change in peace operation contexts in Africa and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heiko. The next opening remarks will be done by Her Excellency Ms. Hannah Serawatete, the United Nations Special Representative of the Secretary General to the African Union and Head of the United Nations Office to the African Union. Your Excellency, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this event, discussing emerging dynamics in peace operations in Africa. Noting that both the United Nations and the African Union discussions are ongoing to reconceptualize peace support operations to keep in step with the changing nature of conflict, anticipating new and emerging threat variables that will determine the formats and models of future peace operations globally and on the African continent. And therefore, this discussion is most timely. I also want to congratulate both KATPC and IPSS for this important collaboration, and of course, GIZ for their support. Because as we know, our continent is vast and diverse, and collaboration of this nature gives us the opportunity to learn from each other and also to learn more about each other. As we see a shift from more traditional peacekeeping missions that fall under Chapter 6 of the UN Charter with the aim to settle conflict by peaceful means, towards peace enforcement approaches as envisaged by Chapter 7, the future of peace support operations will certainly require a more flexible, more mobile, and less static approach, and thus will incur more risk. The issue also has to be considered within the broader context of, as Dr. Jonas mentioned, geopolitical trends and great power relations, the rise of regional powers, the increased threat posed by intrastate conflict on our continent, and also the risks posed by non-state actors, as well as climate change and its impact on populations. The financing models currently in use for peace support operations may also have to be significantly reviewed and changed in order to make sure that we can sustain the missions that we deploy until they have delivered on their mandate. As we have seen, poor exit strategies can have the impact of destroying the work that has taken place over years of time and effort and endeavor, and the deployment of resources by state and non-state actors. These challenges underscore the importance of partnerships in the area of peace and security, and indeed the importance of the United Nations African Union Partnership. The conflict landscape in Africa is characterized by increasingly complex interactions, including socioeconomic factors, pressures on natural resources exacerbated by climate change, governance deficits, and in some cases, the absence of state authority and its commensurate impact on the delivery of service or the lack thereof. The maintenance of law and order, the rule of law, protection of human rights, and protection against human rights violations and access to justice, and marginalization that can result in a less inclusive polity, with a particularly negative impact on women and minorities, and human security fragilities, compounded by violent extremism, we have seen has wrought considerable damage and misery across our continent. And our traditional response to conflicts has to change. We also have to focus, as has been mentioned by previous speakers, on the issues of the psychosocial dimension of the human experience in conflict, to which we have not given the requisite and desired attention. Neglecting the psychosocial impact of social injustice and violence towards individuals, who comprise the society at large, can affect the ability of communities to embrace reconciliation and identify with the necessary changes that have to be brought about in order for our peace-building efforts to show positive results. Peacekeeping must ultimately place the individual at the center and recognize the resulting psychosocial impact of conflict on people in order to create an environment where societies can move together beyond the hurt, damage, and often hatred to a state of mind where peaceful coexistence can once again be possible. In bringing these pillars together, it will be necessary to take full cognizance of the political dynamics in the different environments, recognizing that peacekeeping is an intensely political undertaking, requiring political consensus and clear political objectives from the outset. So indeed, I think we've reached a space where more thought, more analysis, more information sharing, more focusing on early warning and early action should become the priorities for the future of our engagement together in peacekeeping operations. There has been an evolution in the composition and approaches in peace operations, with a gradual move from a military focus to a wider scope that includes police and civilian initiatives for early recovery and peace building in the areas of law and order, security sector reform, governance transformation, and political processes. Not, of course, forgetting the humanitarian and development nexus, which encompasses many other areas. It's important for us, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as our respective organizations, I'm talking here about the United Nations and the African Union, continue to engage in our ongoing reform processes, to have a situation where we move to have much closer, frank, and forthright deliberations and discussions in how we assess and how we engage together in making sure that all of these collective efforts have a positive impact. I think it's important for us now to realize that more than ever, we're not going to have the kind of resources that have previously been available for peacekeeping operations. We have to do more with less. We have to try and cover as many areas as possible. But at the same time, we need to leverage our respective strengths and understand how a division of labor and more effective collaboration can help us, especially on our continent, to achieve the impacts that we seek. Thank you very much for your attention.
The next opening remarks would be by His Excellency Mr. Kwesi Appiah Asante, Deputy Ambassador of Ghana to Ethiopia. Her Excellency Ms. Amadama Chuma will not be able to join us as she had to attend an important meeting in Ghana. Your Excellency, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. When the UN speaks and the AU also speaks, Ghana is a subset of those institutions. And therefore, shall we put our hands together for Her Excellency Hannah Sewa Tete for wonderful speech. Again, I wonder why, because most of the participants here are from the security agencies. And there's recent past Inspector General of Police by name Asante Appiah. He's not here, but his name has been adopted to me. I'm not Appiah. My name is Kwesi Asante, representing Ambassador of Ghana. Thank you. Your Excellency Hannah Sewa Tete, Head of the United Nations Office to the African Union, Major General Francis Ofori, the Commandant of IPSS, Deputy Head of Mission, Federal Republic of Germany, Head of Peace and Security Secretariat, I'm sure is here, GIZ, the discussants, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Ambassador of the Republic of Ghana and the Permanent Representative of the African Union and the ECA, Her Excellency Ama Adomachum Amwa. I would like to thank all organizers, especially the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Center, Training Center, for the invitation extended to her to deliver the opening remarks at this workshop. She regrets her unavoidable absence to equally important engagement in Accra. She has, however, requested me to convey her apologies and read her statement on her behalf and extend her best wishes for successful workshop with outcome that will be enhance peace operations in our continent, Africa. Therefore, deliberating on the theme emerging dynamics in peace operations in Africa, which seeks to critically examine the elusiveness of peace operations in Africa, an indispensable ingredient for our development. It's very relevant to the continent charts in its path to peace and development that African Union will be committed to partner Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Center and other institutions in its march towards the humanitarian development, peace, mental health, and psychosocial supports and the peace support operations in Africa. Distinguished participants, I urge all participants in this important workshop to reflect on how we can capitalize on our different perspectives towards understanding the dynamics of HDP, Nexus, and MHPSS in Africa-led peace support operations. Development of specific guidelines to suit our unique peacekeeping environment is crucial in this direction. Tailored responses by the various national and regional actors are worth considering in your deliberations. There is the need to integrate MHPSS services into the existing health services and capacity building of a key actors. Finally, development of guidance, manuals for MHPSS, programming for peacekeepers prior to deployment, and establishment of temporary psychosocial support hubs in peacekeeping camps is also worth considering. Let me conclude by saying that as we deliberate on the emerging dynamics in peacekeeping operations in Africa as a priority area and other weighted matters that confront us as a continental body today, let us all agree that Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center engagement with other stakeholders should be from a position of unity and strength, and not weakness, in position of mutual respect and interdependencies, so that we can help deal with the security challenges that Africa is confronted with today. With these few remarks, let me welcome all of you to Addis Ababa, the city of flowers, and declare the workshop duly open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Last but not least, opening remark would be delivered by Mr. Zinurin Al-Ghali, Chief of Policy Development Unit at PISA Port Operations Division at African Union Commission. He is here representing His Excellency Bankole Adoye, Commissioner of the Political Affairs and Peace and Security. Mr. Zinurin, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ubiat, for the introductions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to stand on existing protocols and to go straight to the remarks of the AU. As you're all aware, I am here representing the AU Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, His Excellency Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, who wanted to be here with you all, but have to attend to other competing priorities. In this regard, the Commissioner conveys his gratitude to the co-organizers for inviting. Thank you. In this regard, the Commissioner conveys his gratitude to the co-organizers for inviting him and the AU to be part of this important event and initiative. As other speakers have indicated, it is indeed important that three like-minded institutions jointly convened this event to look at the humanitarian development and peace nexus, as well as mental health and psychosocial support in peace operations. As the AU, we note how critical it is to ensure a comprehensive approach to humanitarian support, development efforts, and peace operations. This comes from the AU's experience in deploying peace operations in highly volatile contexts, characterized by dire humanitarian and security crisis that impedes efforts to facilitate development. It also comes at a time when the AU is engaging with Somalia, as well as the UN and EU, and bilateral partners, on a new mission in Somalia from January 2022. It is again at a time when we are engaging, as the AU, with SADC, on the required support that the AU can provide to its mission in Mozambique. It is in this regard that the AU always strives to ensure its continued commitment in contributing to efforts aimed at creating an enabling environment for political processes that will guarantee stability, peace, and development in countries affected by conflict. This is in line with the AU's integration agenda and is at the core of the Agenda 2063 vision, the Silencing the Guns initiative, as well as the Africa Peace and Security Architecture and the Africa Standby Force frameworks. It is within this context that the AU is very mindful of the need to ensure that its peace operations comprise military, police, and civilian personnel to facilitate support to the efforts of conflict-affected states in enhancing stability, security, rule of law, and civil administration. This is done noting that the contributions of AU peace support operations are complementary and thus have to be coordinated with the efforts of host states as well as the assistance provided by humanitarian and development partners. This is because affected countries have these partners long before a PSO is deployed, and they will continue to support affected countries even after the exit of such operations. The AU also takes note very seriously of the issue of mental health and psychosocial support. Thank you. In peace support operation, noting the adverse effects of conflict and the work of AU personnel in such volatile context. This is because the context of AU mandated and authorized missions such as AMISOM, MJTF, G5 Sahel Joint Force We have military components that undertake both offensive and defensive operations to degrade the capabilities of armed opposition groups to reduce and prevent threats to civilians. Similarly, AU police personnel also conduct training and mentoring support under protection by formed police units in its contribution to the development of a professional force in Somalia, for instance. Similarly, our civilian component in AMISOM also work in confined locations that are heavily guarded. Thus, they only venture out of their confined locations, driven in armored personnel carriers to interact with Somali counterparts, ministries, and civilian population under heavy security to prevent and protect them from possible attacks by armed opposition groups. Working under such conditions is definitely a recipe for stress that needs to be prevented and managed, with the necessary mechanisms put in place to ensure PSO personnel can cope in such circumstances. It is within this context that the AU ensures it caters for rest and recuperation of its personnel to enable them to leave mission areas every 6 weeks to return back hale and hearty to continue their invaluable service in humanity in their respective non-family duty stations. I am sure my colleague Adebayo Karim, who is here from AMISOM as Head of Protection, Human Rights, Gender, will be providing more details on the AMISOM experience, for instance, and measures taken to ensure stress management and other support to personnel in the mission area. And I'm sure this will include pre-deployment training and orientation that we facilitate for staff, aspects of staff welfare and duty of care, as well as recreational measures facilitated by AMISOM, for instance. Some of these supports are provided by the UN through the UN Logistics Support Package delivered to AMISOM by the UN Support Office to Somalia. This points to the need for continued enhanced strategic partnership between the AU and the UN, as well as among multilateral and bilateral partners, to ensure PSOs are well-equipped, well-resourced, and sustainably funded to facilitate such responsibilities. It is within this context that I will reiterate the call of the Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security for continued enhancement of the strategic partnership between the AU and the UN to ensure a comprehensive approach in our joint efforts and all our processes for the maintenance of peace and security in the continent. Such joint efforts serve to ensure the AU and Africa's contribution to the UN's primary responsibility for the maintenance of peace and security is attained. It will help in solidifying the international framework for the prevention and response to peace and security globally. It is only through enhanced cooperation that the AU and the UN can ensure all our efforts are also aligned and integrated with the work of humanitarian and development agencies and partners for more sustainable solutions. Further enhancement of such cooperation is timely, noting the trends and trajectories of response models that now goes beyond deployment mainly by the UN previously to include the AU and regional economic communities and mechanisms, and increasingly by coalitions of states who now conduct cross-border and cross-regional operations to address growing terrorist and transnational organized crime-related threats and challenges. As the AU and the UN, and with the support of other relevant stakeholders, we have to ensure the operations conducted by RECs and RMs and coalitions of states ensure mental and psychosocial support in their operations and continue to enhance current efforts in facilitating the humanitarian development and peace linkages. Within this context, allow me to commend the KATPC for developing a training curriculum on mental health, with which the PSOD is making inputs to, from our experiences in orientating our personnel on stress management during pre-deployment and foundational training programs. In this regard, and on behalf of the Commissioner again for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, I would like to once again thank the co-organizers for convening this very important meeting and wish all of us fruitful deliberation that should culminate in action-oriented recommendations to ensure mental health and psychosocial support in PSO, whilst we continue enhancing the humanitarian development and peace nexus. In this regard, I am certain that in the sessions that will follow, you will identify the main issues that needs to be addressed including the role of national and regional actors to facilitate required interventions to enhance current efforts. This expected outcome is in line with the Commissioner's vision to ensure that lessons and good practices are generated and documented from our experiences, with clear actions and interventions identified to be facilitated to effect the necessary changes that are required. The AU is certain that enhancement of current efforts will enable us to better prevent and respond to conflicts and ensure we silence the guns in Africa as envisioned by our heads of state. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zinuri. Now we've come to the end of the welcome and opening remarks. We'll have 5 minutes of interlude and we'll be back with the second session of the workshop. I would like to kindly invite you to enjoy 5 minutes introductory video about IPSS. Stay with us and allow me to thank you again, Your Excellency and distinguished speakers, for the welcome and opening remarks. Thank you.
2005, at this most groundbreaking election, the first time in Ethiopia, where people honestly, voluntarily came out and voted, only to find out that their entire vote was turned down. And that ended in, of course, violent and same time killings. And so that violent conflict definitely claimed over 200 people. And again, that 2007 was a time where Kenyan election ended up in even worse. Nearly 1,000 people died. And it's also a time in Zimbabwe, the election caused, aftermath of election caused almost similar death and destruction of human lives and property as well. So in the academy we were thinking of sustainably preventing conflict, not to repeat such things in Africa, focusing on Ethiopia. So if you like, that is the background why 2007 as a landmark, the time we started IPSS, that is Institute for Peace and Security Studies. So that is its short background, why it is created. It is mainly to deal with preventing conflict, building peace, making peace a culture of society in Ethiopia and in Africa and beyond Africa at large. Because we are a pan-African institution. We have not only Ethiopians or Africans, but also global citizens altogether. So we believe in diversity and inclusiveness. The programs are created so as to realize what they have just talked about. So for peace education, peace research, community outreach, and that of policy dialogue, we have 3 master's programs and 2 PhD programs. So the first one is a regular master's program, which focuses on peace education as well as, of course, peace research. And another master's program is executive masters, where people at grassroots level as well as highest leadership level get engaged, refine their skills. The third master's program is global studies with special focus on peace and security in Africa, which focuses mainly on empirical data, empirical research. That global studies is in collaboration with University of Leipzig, Germany. Finally, we have PhD programs. The 2 PhD programs follow the same routes of that of master's programs. One is devoted to African university, African students, and the second one is devoted to global studies, which is, as I jointly organized with that of the University of Leipzig.
The Africa Peace and Security Program works to complement the work of the African Union and its regional mechanisms under the Africa Peace and Security architecture, as well as the Africa governance architecture through training, research, and policy dialogues. Its main aim is to build the capacities through the training and research and policy dialogues, and also in the areas of conflict prevention, resolution management, as well as post-conflict interventions in order to improve the security of lives and infrastructure on the continent. The Maiden Forum was implemented in 2012 in Bahada. The forum works to bring together key, high-level key stakeholders of the continent, mainly heads of state, former heads of state, and very high-level policymakers and experts. They sit in one room to discuss Africa's peace and security challenges, and they come up with suitable African-led solutions that can be implemented to mitigate against those challenges of the continent. And so far we've implemented around 9 editions of the Tana Forum, and we'll be now going into the 10th edition later this year, on the theme managing security threats and building resilience for the Africa that we want. And we hope to do this 10th edition in a hybrid format. The forum has been successful in terms of coming up with recommendations or outcomes that the Secretariat, the TANA Secretariat, shares with the rest of the continent in terms of especially those that are involved in policy making. And then even before the TANA Forum itself, we implement quite a number of activities that complement the TANA Forum. In terms of the Secretariat, the TANA Forum is hosted by the Institute for Peace and Security Studies at Addis Ababa University, and that's where you find the Secretariat itself, and the host country being the federal government of the Republic of Ethiopia also provides a lot of support to the forum in terms of technical and logistical support. And then in terms of governance, the forum is governed by a board of advisors. These are high-level personalities that are based across the continent. That also includes former heads of state, and currently, for the past years, it's been chaired by former president of Ghana, John Mahama, and before that, it was chaired by the former president of Nigeria, His Excellency Obasanjo. And aside from that, the forum is also governed by a team of technical committee members. They are also experts working in different spheres on the continent. They provide the Secretariat with various technical support.
Good afternoon. Excellencies, members of the High Table, allow me to stand on the existing protocols. Good afternoon, colleagues from the IPSS, Kofi Annan, who have traveled all the way from Accra to this for this program. Colleagues from the IPSS, and of course our colleagues from the GIZ, both Ghana and Accra-based GIZ. Members here presently, physically present, and those who are virtually present to this very exceedingly important program to deliberate on the HDP, the Humanitarian Development and Peace Nexus. I think it was General Fori, when he was making his opening remark, he mentioned the fact that the HDP Nexus offers a common pathway for practitioners who had hitherto had a way of working in silos, to work in a very cooperative and collaborative manner. What another one of the speakers referred, I think it was Aiko, who referred to it as to foster a coherence of approach amongst the humanitarian practitioner, the development actors, and the peace actors. Although the HDP actors, they tend to work in the same theater, but over the decades, their approaches have tended to be different. The reasons for this include, but is not limited to, the difference in mandates, the mandating authority, the difference in working philosophies and principles, the difference in the length of time they are meant to be in the mission, and etc. However, there's now the reality that this approach is flawed. You take the humanitarian actors first, for example. The humanitarian fraternity, their main engagement within the mission area is to provide humanitarian relief to the most vulnerable in the area. However, this approach one of the unintended consequences of this approach is that by so doing, they may actually not be able to look into the underlying factors of why they are in the mission area in the first instance. And this may include lack of democratic governance, lack of respect for human rights, lack of fair distribution of natural resources. You may also find that this silo approach may lead to, again, inadvertently, may lead to the fact that the local system may not be able to respond to deliver the service that is required and prepare for the future. And again, you may also find that the silo approach may lead to the fact that there is no synergy amongst the practitioners. The same applies to the development actors and the peace actors. In fact, as the SRSG say, in the context of the African Union, we are actually more of the Chapter 7 involvement. We are involved in areas that there's no peace to keep. We are heavily involved in insurgency and asymmetric context, and because of the principle of the humanitarian, for example, they may not want to work closely with the peace actors. So the idea of the nexus, therefore, is to find a way to join up a join up approach amongst these three practitioners to how to ensure that we have a collective outcomes of what we actually wanted. And as the Dr. Adeto say, maybe when the barrier of Afghanistan's, the NATO's involvement in Afghanistan is written, perhaps one of the lessons learned may be that the HDP nexus should be a par for the course in missions like that. So that's where we are here today, and we have been guided by the organizers of this event to look broadly into three topics. The three topics. The first one is the importance of the HDP nexus in peace operations in the context of Africa. Now, I will introduce my panelists in due course, but to lead in these particular topics will be Jan Pisil, who is the research director at the Austrian Study Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution, and is also an associate professor in the political science at the University of Vienna. Jan, through my involvement with him in previous encounters, has worked extensively in the African continent, and his work focuses on peace processes and political settlement, the politics of donor in peace building, resilience, and South Sudanese politics. Jan has previously worked in the political settlement research program at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, which program was funded by the UK FCDO. And then he is also a writer who has written on pertinent subject on this. So we will benefit from his experience in these areas. Then the second topic is the cooperation opportunities for implementing the HDP Nexus. This is a very important topic. There are a number of questions on this topic, and to lead in this topic is our sister Pauline Chetkuti, who is the head of policy for Oxfam in Great Britain. I hope Pauline is online and that she can be projected on the screen. Pauline, by way of a brief biodata, is a legally trained lawyer in the field of IHL and international human rights law. And she's worked variously for national and international NGOs in Palestine and Afghanistan before joining an entity in Paris to fight against hunger in the world. She's now with the Oxfam in Great Britain, and she's part of her remit in this new position is to develop policy to support partners and team in fragile and conflict-affected countries to fight against poverty and inequality, and to address the critical theme of protection of civilians and the likes. She's also an author, and has written a number of books and co-written some in the area of humanitarian principles, which I think will be part of what we'll be discussing this afternoon. The humanitarian principles, how they will affect the possibility of the HDP nexus. The third topic will be the role of national and regional actors in the implementation of the nexus. And to do this, we are lucky to have my brother here, Dr. Philip Atukwa-Yefio. He's both an academic and a practitioner, and he coordinates the African Union. He is the coordinator of the regional stabilization strategy for the crisis management and post-conflict reconstruction division, the AU Commission. He's been coordinating the stabilization effort within the Lake Chad basin. Before joining the African Union, Philip has extensive experience as an academic. Was involved in a number of research relating to peace and security in Africa. He's also been actively engaged in designing and facilitating training modules on human security management, CVE, and the identification of vulnerable communities for human security intervention in the African continent. So those are my panelists, and the way we have structured this program, this event, is that there's a number of questions that will take round. I will take turn to ask my panelists. And then once we finish the first set of questions, hopefully we'll have time to go for the second round of questions. And after we've exhausted the question, hopefully we should have some 25-30 minutes to then interrogate by way of question and answer from people here in the room and those who are with us virtually. So, Jan, allow me to start with you. And I'm going to start by asking you to please remind us. I know the SRSG mention it. But what are the dynamics in the of the conflict in the AU, in the African continent, and what does the HDP nexus mean? Can it be helpful to resolving the conflict in Africa?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for being here. I mean, this is actually almost two questions, is it? And indeed, they're connected because what we see, and we've heard this before, that the dynamics of conflict in Africa change, especially in recent years, from being more kind of a political thing where you have kind of clear parties to, in many contexts, a more diffused conflict where you have several challenges ongoing at the same time, and where it's clear that you won't have a clear-cut peace process that would lead you to like a peace agreement and to an outcome that then can be supported by additional means that come in afterwards. So you have something like a permanent setting of kind of war, peace in between that is very localized often and very hard to kind of pin down politically. And there you need to have something in place like a complex answer that brings together all these different components from humanitarian to development. And this is, in fact, I think the new element of the HDP Nexus, also peace building in this setting. And here we come to the actual meaning. I mean, the HDP Nexus is as such not a new thing. There is since decades basically going on an effort to bring together several of the work streams that go on in complex crises, which is especially development and humanitarian efforts. There was LRRD, Linking Relief, Rehab and Development, some time ago. Then resilience became quite a big thing a decade ago, which is still around and postulates the combination of these different elements. But peace has always been a bit out of these equations. There was things like do no harm. There was not like, even especially for humanitarian actors, to not fuel conflict by humanitarian means, what has historically happened. There is conflict sensitivity, but the HDP Nexus has an aim and kind of a vision that goes beyond that and says actually there's really one thing that we have to achieve together, and it's not really different between what we all want. This is, of course, challenging, and one of the challenges is, and this, I guess, is also where the HDP Nexus in this context comes from, is the challenge within the UN. And as we've heard before, the UN peacekeeping missions are changing. And what I want to highlight here is in particular that the civilian component of peacekeeping missions gets stronger and stronger. You have political affairs, you have civil affairs, you have human rights division. And they are stepping in a way a bit into the turf of what the UN country team did and what traditional development actors and other actors did. And I think here it was then the point that instead of creating a competition between actors who have actually the same interest and even partly the same kind of structural background, it was necessary to create an approach that goes beyond something like coordination, but really enforces almost, and often they do this with financial means, at least incentivize collaboration on the ground around collective outcomes.
Thank you so much, Jan. I actually take the point you made about the fact that the Nexus is actually not particularly new. There have been efforts in the past. You mentioned the durable approach. But the HDP Nexus actually goes beyond, and I suppose it goes beyond programmatic effort into a deeper concept. And you also mentioned the fact that there have been collaboration of sort between the development and the humanitarian fraternities in the past, but the peace actors have somewhat been excluded. And this then take me nicely to my next question to Pauline. I hope Pauline is online. We have, there has been an issue with the humanitarian practitioners and their willingness to collaborate with the peace actors. You find that in high-intensity conflict environments, like the one we have in Somalia, for example, the peace actors are the first responders into an area of immense need. They are probably arguably better prepared to offer at least immediate life-saving support to the people, the most vulnerable in that area. But as a result of the fact that the peace actors are often considered to be part of the conflict, humanitarian practitioners are often reluctant and to work with them. So my question to Pauline, and it's again like my first question to Jan, is going to be two questions in one. The first one is that what are the opportunities for cooperation between humanitarian development and peace actors in peace operation setting? That's the first question. And the second, which is a toss-up, the second part of the question is that what are the limitations to achieving those cooperations? Pauline, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for those multifaceted questions. And I will probably start with another question within your question. You are clearly saying that humanitarian actors have an issue and lack willingness to engage with peace actors whilst they are the first responders often in a conflict. And I would ask, okay, but who are those peace actors and who do we determine or who do we identify as peace actors? And I think this is one of the key issues that we currently face within the humanitarian aid sector is to define what peace is. So are we talking about what we call the big P, the government-centered security actors, which are part of very politicized, very state-driven policies and strategies, or are we talking about the local sector, the local groups, the social cohesion groups that are working at local level, where humanitarian and development actors are much more inclined to work with? So as Oxfam, this is the key dilemma that we are trying to work around in the latest document that you might want to go and look at that we published in July about those dilemmas within the humanitarian development peace nexus. I think this is something that has not yet been sorted. We don't hold clear answers to how to navigate the problem of what peace is. But there are opportunities nonetheless. What are those opportunities? Bringing and working together towards more coherence means also working towards a collective vision for the future that is defined with the partners, co-created with partners. It's a possibility for collective planning with other actors. And as you said before, the possibility to co-construct collective outcomes that would not necessarily come out of a response that is only based on the symptoms and not treating the root causes of an issue. It allows for, again, a monitoring and evaluation collectively of the success or not, or the shortcomings of such a response. The other opportunities, of course, of working together is because it brings a greater support to what we call the localization agenda, but making sure that really local grassroots groups, human rights, women-led groups can actually be key responders in the response. When you said, for example, that peace actors were the first responders, I would like to say local actors are the first responders, and they need to be supported. And I think this is where the HDP, the triple nexus with a long-term vision, can really bring a benefit to all the different actors. As you said, there are also limitations, and then we're going back indeed to the question of who we are working with. and how do we manage the different mandates. The dilemma regarding upholding the humanitarian principles of independence, humanity, impartiality, and neutrality across those humanitarian development and peace sectors is key in the debate, and stems from the fact that those different mandates cause us to work with different actors, including in particular government-related actors. As I said, the peace component refers to security and stabilization agenda, state building, or other state-driven agendas, and we refer to much grassroots level of community level peace building or social cohesion. We would rather ensure that we support human-centered rather than state-centered responses focused on communities and reconciliations within groups. So this is where this situations stem. To go beyond the limitation, I think organizations such as Oxfam, but others, have found different solutions, in particular partnering with other actors that are better placed to be coordinating with peace actors. We using behind the scenes tactics to support partners and more visible activities. And of course, and as was said before, everything is being based on a context and risk analysis really designed to find the right balance between our humanitarian identity and response and the needs to have a long-term and human-centered approach. So I think, again, we'll probably come back on the solutions, but there are ways to circumvent those limitations that we see to ensure that we have a collective, a response that really brings the best solutions for the populations. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Pauline. Thank you so much. I think I will get back to you on the issue of the of what peace we are talking about. But the points are well taken, and the focus on the localized support is actually the aspirations that we should be looking forward to. But let me now go to my brother, Dr. Phillips, to give us his insight on what should be the role of national and regional actors in the HDP Nexus thinking. And I'm going to ask two questions in one as well, because I know we may not have a lot of time. And to ask the second question on how can peace operations infuse HDP thinking in their mandates and operation, especially within the context of the African Union Commission. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Karim, and good afternoon to all of you. You don't have time, so I'll just go straight into it. Now, in terms of the role expected or the role to be played by national and regional actors, I think it's fairly simple. And I'd just like to throw our minds back to when we started that conversation. Sorry, is it better? Yes. When we started having the conversation on PSOs, so essentially it was peacekeeping. Then at some point, I believe we all felt that it was important to make it more multidimensional. What did we do? We created awareness, we trained. Then we moved on somewhere around 1994. We started talking about people-centered security, human security. What did we do? We created awareness, we started training. And then at some point, we tried to co-opt it into our development models. And so if you ask what states have to do, it's basically the same trend. Now, HDP has been determined as critical to the success and indeed sustainability of some of these interventions. And so what do we do? The first thing that countries would have to do would be to create awareness. Once that is done, it is important for them to invest in capacity building. And so that's one. Again, you can talk about at the operational level where it is important for interministerial or interagency committees to be set up. And you see, you won't know how important this is unless you're in the field. And you realize that you're dealing with countries that still hold on to the vestiges of the old order. And so even when you try to push an idea of HDP Nexus, you realize that collaboration within these countries are not as smooth as you expect them to be. And so beyond training and capacity building, it's also important to build institutions that speak to the coherence that we are talking about, and that can represent the country's interest from a multidimensional perspective. Now, I'll quickly go to the regional actors. Now, with regard to regional actors like the AU and others, often there's an assumption that because you work at the AU and I work at the AU, we talk. But I'm sure colleagues here will know that sometimes we actually don't talk at all. And so with the regional organizations, it's important to coordinate efforts at two levels. One has to be internally. To what extent will PSOD, for instance, talk to social affairs in the context of the Lake Chad Basin? So that's one. Because if our colleagues from PSOD are implementing quick impact projects in some communities in Chad, and they are able to build schools, but are unable to provide teachers, then perhaps it would have been useful if they had spoken to social affairs to see the extent to which they can complete the assignments, to ensure that at least whatever was envisaged ab initio would happen. And so that's one challenge that would have to be addressed. Internal coordination would have to be enhanced. And then in terms of our strategic engagement with our partners too, with the UN, Madam, we have a team in your office that talk to us every day about the Lake Chad Basin. To what extent do we relate to them? Often we've complained, my colleagues in the room, we've complained that they only come to us when they want information, and they've pushed back that when you start programs, you don't talk to us. And so there's also the need for a lot of talking to each other when it comes to strategic engagements with partners, whether it's the UNDP, the UNOAU, or other partners in the field. I think that is very important. And then perhaps also very important is the need for regional organizations to delineate some kind of standard operating procedures for doing these things. Because for a very long time, we have done it the old way. I'm glad Zeno is here. Policy development, he can tell you. We've gone through this process the same old way. Now we're talking about the new way of working. We're talking about the need for deeper, collaboration and coordination and so on and so forth. But it's important to put it down because as you see, one of the primary challenges of HDP Nexus implementation is when you get to the field and the person implementing the project has no clue or doesn't believe in it. And this is actually quite common. And so beyond talking about it and having nice events such as this, it's important to put things on paper. Create a standard operating procedure for dealing with these things at the field level. Once we do that, then we can say that we're actually on course to achieve. Now, in terms of how we can infuse HDP Nexus implementation into mandates and operations of PSOs, I mean, it's important to first recognize that mandates are created at the strategic level. At the AU, it's the Peace and Security Council. And so you see, there's something I call gold in, gold out. And if I don't say gold, I'd have said something else. And so if you really want HDP Nexus to be infused into PSOs, you need to talk to the people who create these mandates, the people who inform or describe or develop these mandates, And it's not far-fetched. I mean, I believe that, and I was sharing with Annie back there, that sometimes when we start these things, we often start from the bottom upwards. And so you have the situation where I am very comfortable with HDP Nexus. If my boss is not, then it becomes a problem. And then 8 years down the line, when we've lost all the opportunities, my boss finally gets to understand it and says, there's HDP Nexus. I said, but sir, 8 years ago, we were talking about this. And so perhaps even as we start from base, it's also important to start from the top. And thank you very much, Madam, for coming to an event like this. And so basically, if we are to put it in PSOs, it has to be reflected in the mandate. Now, in terms of the operational level, it's the same thing. In the development of our concepts of operations for our forces, it's important that we clearly state these things, because it would influence the attitude, it could even influence pre-deployment training, and so on and so forth. Now, unless we do that, it's actually a simple matter. If we want them to reflect it, we first have to create the awareness, get people to buy into it, and then following that, it's a walk in the park. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ari. I think you've said it. Mandate is very critical. I know that in all the AU mandated or authorized missions, we don't have the mandate to actually engage in humanitarian activities. The mandates of the humanitarian mandates that we are given is to actually liaise in facilitate the humanitarian support. So that is very key for the purpose of the Nexus. We are running out of time, and I will have to actually ask one more questions of each, and I will invite you to kindly be brief in your response. And I'll start again with Jan. And my question is, to what extent is the HDP Nexus effective in attaining sustainable peace?
Yeah, I mean, this is a complex question. I think the problem is there might not be the instrument there that is effective in attaining sustainable peace, because this is still something that people develop from their own. So you can basically support, and I think what the HDP Nexus here can do is address some of the existing funding gaps and also action gaps that have evolved in recent years in complex crises. And this is, for instance, one of the things I have experienced in my work more recently in South Sudan, that there is quite a sustainable effort in facilitating local peace committees, local peace agreements, also really on community level. Often in these agreements there are commitments, very basic commitments, often of humanitarian relief coming in, of some development action coming in, some economic measures. And the problem is, in contrast to kind of the big peace agreements, nobody's then really responsible in funding these things and doing these things. And here, this approach, and also like tailored funding mechanisms that work in this HDP kind of vision, are able to address this. And this indeed, in some of the elements in South Sudan working. There is a UN, like from the UN mission actually, implemented fund called RSRTF, Reconciliation, Stabilization, Resilience Trust Fund, actually an initiative by the then SRSG in South Sudan. And this fund is now particularly deciding to open a funding stream in some of the areas where several of these local processes are going on, to particularly address this gap of the commitments made, often towards the communities, and that nobody was really responsible in addressing.
Thank you so much. I will come to the issue of funding with Pauline in due course. But Pauline, I'm going to ask you quickly two questions. The first one is we want to benefit from your experience by guiding us on what are the existing framework for HDP cooperation and coordination in complex crises. If those frameworks are not there, or they are not strong, what will be your suggestions on the framework? That is the first question. The second question, and my last question for you, unfortunately because of the time constraint, is and I go to what Jan has just said. What are the challenges of resourcing and financing in the implementation of the HDP Nexus? Pauline, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. These are really key questions, and by starting with the question about frameworks, I would like to respond as well to panelists before last about what is needed internally to change to move from a speech, from a theory, an intention, to actually pragmatically make the changes on the ground. I think this is the key question, and I think this is also reflected in your questions about framework. What is needed to change for it to work? Because we overall agree that this is a great idea to work better together. So I think training is obviously a good thing. I think beyond that, we absolutely need to change internally how the different teams work together. And I think this is part of the framework that needs to be put in place. So I would take examples of our country teams. For example, in South Sudan, there's been steps taken by the country programs in terms of compatible management structures, with different position being created so that there is no silos between those working on the humanitarian development or peace programming, so that they actually work together and have an understanding and adhere as well to the question to working together. I think this is also key, as it was said before. The humanitarian development program managers are responsible to look at the different aspects, and the staff in charge of looking at the funding also have a very clear vision, of 360 vision of the different types of programs are being implemented, therefore the different types of donors that would be able to support those programming. So obviously it's not always a walk in the park, unfortunately, but I think those structural internal changes put us in a better place to make it work. In Chad, for example, we were working as well with the mindset of the HDP Nexus, realigning the structure, having pilot programs and studies and policies, making sure that the different sectors are aligned. So I think this is one framework that needs to be put in place, and obviously this is true for NGOs and the overall, let's say, civil aid sector response. This is true for other frameworks. I'm thinking about global frameworks such as the OECD, DAC, Development Assistance Committee recommendations on the Nexus, on the HDP. These can be a framework that can be used both by practitioners and by donors and by regional authorities and institutions to have a key framework of understanding of what the Nexus is and how it's implemented with the different nuances between the mandates. Obviously, making sure that the AU and the Peace and Security Council within the AU works better with the UN Security Council, and how the advocacy towards those institutions work together, and thinking at the long-term impact of a conflict and what needs to happen for the populations to have not only the symptoms of the conflict or the crisis being addressed, but the root causes as well. Going quickly to the question of resourcing, I think this is a key issue, and I wish I had simple answers to that, because that would help a lot of my counterparts and partners. Unfortunately, that goes through a lot of that advocating towards donors as to what works and what doesn't. Preparedness and meal and showing how things work, what has been done that works and what doesn't. Bringing the donors with us along the way of our programs to really keep them with us and support their to ensure their support in our programs. But unfortunately, there is still very much of earmarking funding for specific outputs rather than an outcome-based thinking, which means that the coherence between humanitarian and development or peace program is not always there. There is also a need, as we said, to keep separate funding channels for specific humanitarian work sometimes, so that, let's say, politicized agendas are not included within exclusively humanitarian response. But collective advocacy towards multi-year flexible funding is ongoing. We have a lot of foundations and donors who are supporting the Triple Nexus, and I think that those events like today are contributing to the changing the mindset in that. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pauline. Indeed, the event of today is one of those ways that we continue to benefit from the generosity of the donor. And then, without much ado, because of time, I will now go to my last but not the least panelist. That is Dr. Philip. And you see, Dr. Philip, we have in the African Union, we have as you know, we have the HAPSA mechanism, we have the AGA, the AGA mechanisms as well, and as you know, we now have a single department incorporating both political affairs and security. To what extent will the fusion of those two different departments support the ideas of the HDP nexus, and what resource or capacities will be required by the African Union to implement them?
I mean, thank you very much for that, but I'm sure you know the answer. You know, two huge departments, political affairs, very huge, peace and security, very huge. You bring them together. The expectation, obviously, is to be able to coordinate better. And that's what we would hope would happen. Obviously, there are bound to be some challenges, especially with regard to the volume of work that the new department has to do. And as we can also tell, the pace at which our security resume is changing almost monthly. So there's a lot to be done. But in terms of speaking to each other, I think bringing them together would definitely enable a lot more coherence than we have seen in the past. Beyond that, we've also had some structures prior to the merger that kind of signify, even if not in name, the kind of collaboration and coherence that we are talking about. Under the framework of the Interdepartmental Task Force on PCRD, for instance, colleagues have been trying to engage other departments and other units across the African Union Commission to be able to speak with a common voice when it comes to the AU's support for activities such as those in the Sahel and those in the Lake Chad Basin, and so on and so forth. Again, if you check the AU PCRD policy and its guidelines notes, there are indications that the framers of these documents recognize the need to work together. Of course, it doesn't always happen, but I can't say that there hasn't been an attempt to at least build deeper coordination, so that when the AU speaks with a single voice on that. Just a quick note on the funding bit, to just touch on what Pauline raised. I think that it's a big deal, and it's probably the elephant in the room, because there are partners, funding partners, who talk about HDP and paint it in such flowery terms. But when it comes to funding, it is still inflexible, and that's the problem. There are organizations that will tell you that we do not fund security. And yet we all recognize that security in most cases provides the basis for humanitarian and development activities. And so if you are not funding security, what are you building on? You understand? And so these are issues that I believe we should find some time to have a conversation about. Yeah, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. Again, that's the elephant in the room. And as the SRSG say, I suppose we have to learn to expect that we will not always going to get the fundings that we believe we require for activities, but we keep knocking on the doors. I think we have taken, we have eaten into the time for the discussion. So I'm not going to ask additional questions. I'm just going to throw the floor open for question. Before I do that, let me quickly respond to Pauline's reference to the OECD DAC recommendations. I think the organizers of this event and individuals here who have not read those recommendations, I invite them to do so. And I'm reading something on the chat room here by, I think it's Hugh McLeman, who is saying that there are efforts underway to better transit the principles of the OECD DAC framework into practice through shared training and tools delivered through a multi-stakeholder training facility to be launched in December 2021. I think that is an event to look forward to for those of us who are interested in this Nexus business. So I therefore invite our colleagues, virtual colleagues, and those who are here. I think we still have some 15 minutes, 10 minutes to look into the question and answers. My panelists are on standby to respond to the questions. If there are observations, please do so. You have the floor, colleagues. Yes, Excellence.
You don't have to call me Excellence. I hope that you can hear me without the mic. I'm trying to throw my voice. Okay. Thank you. It's a comment. You know, when I said in my comments that we have to learn to do more with less, I think we have to be realistic. Following this COVID pandemic, even though it hasn't been the same kind of financial crisis of the 2008 period, countries are in an economic crisis, including our traditional funding partners. So the assumption that they will be able to do what they used to do, I think is mistaken. I think the AU could actually leverage more funding if it were to take the initiative with its own funds, i.e. the Peace Fund, to try and engage some of these activities, and on the basis of that, request for additional support to be able to move on some of these programs and initiatives, because then you've put your money where your mouth is. You have started and you have designed your own project. And then at that point, when you are inviting partners, you are saying, this is what I'm doing. If you want to join me, that's fine. If not, I'm on my own. I've already started this. And I think it would also get the organization, quite frankly, a lot more respect than in a situation. And, you know, I think it's you don't mind if I speak frankly as somebody who also comes from the continent and wants to see our continent succeed. I think that if we were to think along those lines, to work along those lines, and to, again, show the initiative in conceptualizing, starting, financing, asking for additional support thereafter, we would probably get more traction than doing all the necessary preparatory work, then going to say, can you do this, or can you do that, or can you do that? Once you've actually started something, you see that other people also want in to know what it is that you're doing. And if the price for coming in is supporting you, you're in a better position to dictate how that works. So I would like us seriously to look at that. Now, on the issues of coordination, and I know other people would want to ask, so let me just be quick. Since this pandemic, we've learned to work online. Let's use those tools to have more coordination between our respective organizations. We don't need a conference. We don't need to travel. We can set the time for a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. It takes X number of hours. We have the discussion. We agree on next steps. We move on. Let's take advantage of this crisis to revise the way we work and the way we engage, to look to do things more strategically, to look to do things most cost effectively, and to really build the partnership in terms of not just let's discuss how we do this together, but let's actually find ways of concretely working and investing together. And then I think the AU and sub-regional organizations will be in a better position to have more influence on the way this is going to be worked out.
Thank you so much. I think that's very frank and very insightful. The issue of the AU Peace Funds is actually another elephant in the room. We have the Kaberuka report, and we have a lot of reports and action points. Perhaps, Zinu, coming from the PSOD, you may be able to advise the room on the progress so far made with regards to the AU Peace Fund. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot.
You are, but I guess that's why we are here. Thank you very much, Karim and Madam Tete, for those points. Now, what Madam Tete said is clear, and I will confirm that, yes, the AU is making lots of progress and in good stead in that regard, because currently we have over 200,000 contributed. Of course, it's way beyond what we should have. Over 200, about 217 million as at 2 months ago when we confirmed the contributions against the 400 million endowment, which we should have, of course, collected by 2020, but now we've moved that to 2023, of course, because of a number of reasons: slow contributions, agreement on the scale of assessment, and a number of other issues, including the COVID pandemic that actually also has affected that. But that has not delayed a number of other processes. So we have two strands, and you've mentioned them. One is the Peace Fund strand, of course, in terms of the contributions, but again, ensuring a replenishment strategy so that we don't have funds that will be depleted when we just started using it. So we've had those funds saved up in accounts, and we've generated some interest. The PSC is already deliberating on a number of issues regarding the Peace Fund, its use, and its governance mechanism. We are happy to have Madam Tete, an EU representative in the board, in terms of providing advice also on how we can facilitate such. Just last month, the PSC introduced the topic following our commissioner's presentation to the PSC in a retreat about 2 months ago about some of the priorities that he thinks the council should consider. So the PSC tasked its committee of experts to look at those priorities. And I will tell you that lots of progress is being made in terms of starting to utilize the funds, but of course we're still in the decision. But the council is in deliberations on that, and the experts are making clear recommendations on the use of the funds, the amount to be used annually, and when that can actually be facilitated. Again, on the other strand, which is on financing of peace and security activities, including peace support operations by the UN through UN-assessed contribution for operations authorized by the UN Security Council. The AU is also looking at the need to restart those conversations because there were some misunderstanding regarding a number of proposals that were made initially by the AU, including by the High Representative of the Peace Fund and Financing of the Union, Dr. Kaberuka, regarding the issue of 25% commitment of the AU and what that means. And again, the issue of in-principle resolution and authority on a case-by-case basis for use of assessed contribution. So the Commission has also presented a draft Common Africa position paper to the Council on financing of the Union by the UN through access to assessed contribution, and those deliberations are ongoing. So this is just to highlight that I don't want to say anything because I'm only representing the Commissioner because I'm not him, but to indicate that much progress is being made and the Commissioner is quite keen on taking these efforts forward, and I will assure you at my own level that you will definitely see some progress in that in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zino. It actually is quite gratifying to know that there are some progress being made. Although I would say that with regards to the access to the UN assessed contribution, I can only wish us good luck. Yes, Doctor, I don't, okay, okay.
Just a quick comment on the issue of the funding. I think that what I actually wanted to throw the spotlight on is not as much of the funding as it is in the inflexibility in the funding. Because we are talking about HDP, and there have been times when we've had to request that monies meant for humanitarian activities be reprogrammed for development activities and so on and so forth. And most of our organizations find it very difficult to unlock that, flexibility thing, and it affects us in the field. Because let's say you had planned to do ABC with the money, and you go there and the thing has changed. To what extent are we able in our organizations to, assure, the people on the ground that there is some level of flexibility, that we are able to coordinate our activities with partners, because we can quickly switch. There have been times when we've committed ourselves and we've gone back to headquarters, and we've been told that, no, the money is for this. You just cannot transfer it. And so I think that if we are to address HDP Nexus, the extent to which we can promote it, then we should also have a conversation on the flexibility of funding, just to throw some light on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we are running out of time. I don't know whether we can take one more question from the gentleman at the back. Please, yes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for all presenter for your presenting. My question is why Africa can't sustain on their own peace and security operation its own money. It's important to better to balance for internal fund and external fund. You can't own or lead institution of don't pay for it's by challenge on funding sources. So Africa need own funds for their own operation on peace and security. So we should focus on balancing the fund, source of funds. So what your respond on this? Behind of every fund there is rational things behind on that fund. So what Africa Union will be to do to get on funds regarding on this? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think in a way you have just reiterated what the SRSG has said, that for a number of reasons, including the reason of self-respect, African Union ought to be in a position to fund its operations, not only the peace support operations, but even the running of the commission. But the reality is that we are not doing so at the moment. Now, I'm not in a position to actually say why we are not able to do so, because I don't have the visibility. But I take the point you made that it is actually imperative that Africa as a continent should be in a position to actually fund its operation, both the peace support operation and the running of its project and programs. We are now out of time. I see a question online that from Nadia saying that how do we follow the conversation in future? And I think I suppose I can speak for the organizers that a subsequent event to this will be broadcasted, and people who are interested will then be able to join the event. So I'd like to then therefore draw a curtain on this, and to do so I'm very grateful to my panelists both Jan and Dr. Phillips, who are here, and Pauline, who is in the UK. Thank you so much for your inputs. I thank the SRSG for the insightful comments and the clarifications given by Zinu. I thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to be part of this important process, and I hope that a meaningful development will unfold in the not too distant future. I've been told that we will have a 5-minute break before we come back for the concluding session of this very important event. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and please give a round of applause to my panelists.
Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, KAIPTC, a pillar and key player in African peace and security. Welcome to the Center of Excellence in Training, Research, Postgraduate Education. Welcome to the pioneering institution on the agenda of women, peace, and security in Africa. From humble beginnings in 1998, KAIPTC has trained thousands of individuals from over 90 countries and major organizations in Europe, North and South America, Asia, and Africa. The center's mandate is to deliver internationally recognized and professional training courses and related programs to equip personnel with relevant skills and competencies required to meet Africa's present and future complex peace and security challenges. Named after the former UN Secretary General and global icon of peace, His Excellency Kofi Annan, KAIPTC has over 400 training courses in thematic areas of peace support operations, conflict management, and peace and security studies. Considering the changing trends in peace and security, all courses are delivered according to regional and international standards and in line with the capacity needs of ECOWAS, the AU, UN, and member states. KAIPTC undertakes research into the capacity gaps and training needs of ECOWAS, the AU, the UN, and individual member states, as well as policy and operational concerns of peace and security in Africa. With this solid research grounding, our training courses fully equip participants with the required skills and competencies to respond to complex peace and security challenges. This proven research capacity and expertise of KAIPTC is what sets the institution apart from other peacekeeping training institutions on the continent. KAIPTC was the first African peacekeeping training institution to offer postgraduate programs in 2011, and also the first to set up a dedicated research outfit. Since its establishment, the facility has produced cutting-edge research publications and contributed to academic and policy discourses on African peace and security issues. Research informed the development and review of our training courses and academic curricula. Our training courses and academic programs are therefore research-driven in order to make them constantly relevant to the evolving and dynamic trends in the peace and security environment. Through its research, the KAIPTC has disseminated African thinking on peace, security, and conflict issues globally through numerous and diverse publications, policy advice to governmental, non-governmental, and private institutions, and participation in forums for knowledge dissemination. KAIPTC has received international recognition as one of the top foreign policy and international affairs think tanks in the Global Go-To Think Tank Index Report. KAIPTC is the foremost peacekeeping training center to set up a Women, Peace and Security Institute, WPSI. The mandate of WPSI is to build African capacity to fully implement the Maputo Protocol and to support the implementation of the UN Security Council 1325 and its resolutions on women, peace, and security in the context of Africa and beyond. Among others, the Institute focuses on building the leadership capacities of women, increasing women's participation in peace negotiations and preventative diplomacy efforts in Africa, undertaking policy and academic research on gender, peace, and security, and undertaking stakeholder engagements at the strategic, policy, and advocacy levels. The Institute serves as a knowledge center for expanding technical capacity, training, and policy research and analysis on women, peace, and security in order to better inform the broader peace and security agenda in Africa. In 2019, KAIPTC held the maiden edition of the Kofi Annan Peace and Security Forum to facilitate discussions on evolving trends in peace and security in Africa. The annual forum will bring together political leaders, diplomats, and experts to dialogue and share ideas on the most critical and evolving peace and security trends on the African continent.
The Kofi Annan Peace and Security Forum has come to stay, and every year, with your help, we will choose a theme that reflects a concern of the international community, but with a specific focus on Africa.
KAIPTC undoubtedly remains one of the foremost peacekeeping institutions in Africa. KAIPTC, where peace begins.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. Welcome to the session on mental health and psychosocial support, IPSS. From our introductory remarks, we realized that the Major General mentioned the fact that they have commissioned an LDD in mental health and psychosocial support. This year, in March, we piloted the program in Kofi Annan Training Center. From all the discussions so far, you agree with me that the role of our peace personnel over the years cannot be overemphasized. In fact, from research, you realize that as these people put in their effort to contribute to world peace, and for that matter, peace in Africa, they encounter certain psychosocial and mental health issues. And that is why we need to talk about it. So this afternoon, we are going to talk about mental health of our peace support operation personnel. And at the end of the conversation, we hope that we would gain insight into psychosocial difficulties of these personnel. We will know the mental health and psychosocial interventions available. And then we'll also explore the role of our national and regional actors in implementing these interventions. Now with me to do this discussion are three experts. In no particular order, I would want to introduce Ms. Frederique Bubenza. She joins us online. I hope she is there. Please, you project her for me. Ms. Frederique Bubenza is a peace-building practitioner from South Africa. She is currently a senior project leader at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, where she leads an international research on the relationship between MHPSS and peace building. She also is the main person who conducted the baseline study for the MHPSS course in KAIPTC. Ms. Bubenza, is she online, please? Great. Then secondly, we have Dr. Kirindi Odindo. Dr. Odindo is a consultant, clinical and health psychologist based in Kenya. She has vast experience in MHPSS and employee assistance programs, both locally and internationally. She also contributed immensely to the design and pilot implementation of the MHPSS in PSO course at Kofi Annan. Then we have Mr. Raymond Adibayo Karim. He is the head of Protection, Human Rights and Gender Unit in AMISOM, Somalia. He is very important to know. He is also the chairperson of AMISOM Staff Welfare and Recreation Committee. So he deals directly with troops in AMISOM. I am the moderator for this session. My name is Dr. Joanna Lariafutu. I'm also a clinical psychologist consultant. I've conducted studies, pioneering studies in the mental health of post-deployed soldiers in Ghana. And I also am part of the team who designed and piloted the course in MHPSS. So quickly, Frederique would want to start a discussion. I would plead that responses are brief for us to be able to cover a lot of grounds this afternoon. So, Frederica, you conducted a baseline study for the MHPSS course. Kindly share with us the experiences and challenges of peacekeepers with respect to mental health and their psychosocial well-being in the context of PSO during, during and post-deployment. Ms. Bubenza, you have the line.
Thanks, Joanna. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Very well.
Good. It's lovely to be with you all today. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'd like to start by just congratulating KATPC and GIZ and also IPSS today for positioning this topic so centrally. I've been working on this integration between the two fields for the last 6 years, and I'm hugely excited at how quickly excited at how quickly we've managed to get from a baseline study, which I conducted at the beginning of last year, to the point where we're now actually talking with people like yourselves and talking about the potential of integrating MHPSS into sort of policy level interventions. So hats off. This is really a hot and happening topic, and I think it's wonderful that we're recognizing that this needs to be prioritized in our work. So Joanna, thanks for your question. It's a really, really big one. I think, you know, the essence of the baseline study, which I conducted at the beginning of last year, which consisted both of interviews with a number of senior officials and generals at KATPC, as well as alumni and various employees of the Ghana Armed Forces, as well as a survey of over 200 alumni, highlighted how important this issue is. And I think that's something really, really important. It was consistent that everybody had experienced challenges as a result of deployment, and most people did not feel adequately represented and supported in that process. Sorry. So this highlights some very important things. One, of course, that there are massive opportunities for us to research this even further, to understand exactly what kind of support can be provided, but also advocating throughout. What I think is absolutely most important at this point is that we apply a lens that is sensitive to this very problematic acronym MHPSS, mental health and psychosocial support. I think a lens on peace support operations as being inherently quite difficult for human beings, individuals who encounter, and this was highlighted earlier on, peace support operations often being staff, often being the first responders in very, very difficult situations. So how do we apply a lens to the entire deployment process that is more sensitive to the particular needs? And I think it's important to highlight that people I spoke to, senior officials, senior deployees, mentioned examples and case studies of themselves and of others that they had worked with, which really unpack the trauma, the stress, and the immense challenges faced during and after deployment. And that really begins at the very beginning. Moving, leaving family behind, not knowing what is coming on the other side, not being familiar with that context, environmental factors that include, you know, the weather conditions, dust, insects, heat, cold, to those feelings of fear of isolation, you know, often not being able to communicate with family, being restricted in movement, massive fear and uncertainty, you know, related to the political context, of course. I spoke in the survey, I collected results which indicated that 58% of the 200 plus people that participated in the survey had experienced increased anxiety. 52% felt that they had experienced powerlessness, which I think is quite linked as well with this notion of moral injury. Why am I in this place? How can I respond to the difficulties people around me are experiencing, really seeing awful human rights violations perpetrated all the time and yet not necessarily being able to respond. And then, of course, other experiences such as having trouble sleeping, high risk behavior, alcohol consumption. All of these are common factors that were cited by a lot of people, all of whom were very willing to share these experiences with me. And my sense was that part of the reason why this willingness existed is because we're aware that it affects everybody and we really need support in these situations. So I'm not sure if I should be going into what some of the possibilities are, how we can mitigate that, but perhaps that's a helpful starting point, just to highlight where we're at. And perhaps also important to say that one of the statistics I collected was that 70% of people felt that management structures did not have sufficient understanding and did not give sufficient attention for the psychological stress and problems that people feel in their work. So maybe that's something helpful for us to start the conversation with.
Thank you very much, Frederique. I'm sure our participants here and those on our virtual platform who have been to the PSO environment could relate to what she's talking about. Now we have Karim here. He works in the PSO environment and he deals directly with troops under him on welfare issues. And I'm sure, Karim, you can relate to that. She ended by saying that there is not enough, there's no support for them in these environments as far as psychosocial support is concerned. Could you tell us to what extent do African peace missions consider and respond to mental health and psychosocial issues at the PSO environment?
Thank you so much, Dr. Joanna. Yes, allow me to quickly mention that the operating environment of a mission like AMISOM is actually very high intensity. I'm happy that when Zeno was making his remark, he actually did respond to that fact. We have a mission of about 20,000 personnel in Somalia. About 19,000 of them are soldiers. About 900 of them are police, and we have about 60 civilian personnel like myself. Now, the civilian personnel, like Zeno said, lives in a very confined environment. We cannot move freely into the town. We face daily with the issue of mortar attack into the base camp. We have about 70 forward operation bases in Somalia. Our troops are scattered in those FOBs, and on a daily basis, they need to go and take rations to those FOBs. And in so doing, they encounter IEDs. They will attack on a daily basis. I can tell you, as the head of AMISOM Board of Inquiry, that AMISOM has lost more soldiers in the last 10 years than the UN has done in their close to 70 years of experience. So what we have in Somalia is actually a stressed environment where trauma is at play. Now, coming to your question, and I think the questions can be answered in two ways. You said, how does the AU consider the issue of PSS, and how do we respond to that? Now, the first question is, how do we actually consider it? And I can say that to some extent, the AU actually considers issue of mental health and well-being of their staff. And by saying this, I know that we have a number of statutory documents in place. We have the general document for the AU staff regulations and rules, but more technically, we have the administrative guidance. It's a 2016 document. It's an administrative guidance for the treatment of the peacekeepers that are deployed by the AU. And in that document, in fact, at the purpose of that document, it says that the welfare of the peacekeeper is at the centerpiece of the AU. So we have that document, and we have the SOP on wellness, which Zeno refers to, because it's the SOP that allows civilians to have what we call the rest and recuperation to move out of the mission from time to time. The SOP says that we should have a number of things. That is, when we are deploying peacekeepers into a particular area, we should have a counselor, we should have a peer helper, we should have psychosocial support. So we have the document. We also have the various memoranda of understanding that we have entered into with our TCC, and we have the tripartite one that we entered into with the UN. So in terms of whether we consider it, I would say that we actually do consider it. But the problem is, do we actually respond to the issue of mental health and psychosocial support in the mission area? And I think that is an area that we need to improve. Because in AMISOM, I can tell you without disclosing any confidential information that we don't have any trauma counseling capacity in the mission. Okay. We don't have peer helper in the mission. We don't have people like doctors Kirindi and yourself, who are clinical psychologists. And we have these very huge cases of people facing traumatic experience within the mission. Even outside of the mission, we have our soldiers are facing extreme PTSD situation. I know this from my board of inquiry engagement. We have a huge number of soldiers who have left the mission area, who have returned into their capitals, but who have issues. And our capitals, many of them don't have the capacity to deal with those issues. So that is where we are. And that is why one of the reasons why this conversation is actually very pertinent. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Karim. So we have a huge gap in Africa. Elsewhere, from certain researches that I did, I realized that when you go to the Western countries, they actually deploy mental health personnel when they are going on some of these missions. So that leaves Africa with a gap for intervention. And I think Frederica mentioned, and you also mentioned the fact that, well, there may be some interventions on paper, but implementation-wise, we are not doing so well. Partly, I think this could be attributed to the fact that there is a lot of mystery surrounding mental health. When we mention mental health, people shrink because they feel it's shrouded in several misconceptions, and people are tagged and stigmatized. Now we want to demystify mental health. With the emergence of the MHPSS, this narrative is gradually changing. We want to demystify it further. Now, Frederica, I want to come back to you. How can you help us demystify mental health to help people assess mental health and psychosocial support when eventually we get it implemented, by explaining what the MHPSS is? Frederica, you have the line.
I'd perhaps like to just go back one step and perhaps also look at this sort of from a strengths-based perspective. People I spoke to also have a lot of resilience because they're obviously aware what they're getting into, and so they have developed all kinds of techniques to sort of cope in the mission, and there are also efforts underway. So many people cited to me, for instance, how important it is that there are imams and chaplains that are deployed along with in the mission. Can we work with those individuals who are already playing a leadership role to perhaps equip them with more skills and knowledge? There are entertainment facilities, physical training facilities. All of these that's the sort of psychosocial support, right? So deploying yourself in Kirindi would be one thing, but ideally I think we need to look at things more holistically and look at all of the services that are provided. Something as simple as an internet connection so people can have phone calls with their loved ones at the end of a weekend, or relax and watch a film. Those are really important contributing factors, I think. And I think with regards to the demystification, advocacy is our absolute priority here, and I think beginning to talk about what it is, and especially having people who have experienced mental health challenges step to the fore and say, I lived through this and I overcame it with the help of whether it was medication, whether it was psychotherapy, or whether it was by stepping down from a position that was too challenging. We need champions, I think, on the continent who are willing to take these topics on. They need to be high-profile individuals who people can see. I think of Naomi Osaka recently at the one of the big tennis tournaments, coming out and saying, "This is too much. I can't handle it. My mental health is under pressure." That is a huge, huge feat in terms of demystifying and destigmatizing mental health. And I think a lot of that kind of work is needed on the continent. And so we need to talk about awareness-raising initiatives. We need to talk about these issues in schools, and yeah, in that way, sort of champion it. But I think the provision of services is an absolute priority at this point. Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we have established the fact that there are issues with our personnel at the PSO environment, and structures need to be improved as far as intervention provision is concerned. Now, Kirindi, can you tell us about the current and potential capacity building structures for addressing MHPSS in the PSO environment?
Good evening, everyone. Well, that's a very difficult question, and I think if I use, there are two ways of looking at it. If I go back to the humanitarian nexus, we've got one end of things that seems to understand MHPSS. They know it, they look out for it, they support their personnel on the ground. And if you use the UN, for example, the UN has been doing MHPSS a lifetime. In fact, MHPSS comes from a humanitarian space. And in fact, what I'd like to posit in a place like this is that if you are looking at setting up for a PSO personnel space, then we need to shift the narrative to suit the personnel within a PSO, because MHPSS as it stands is not fully suitable. It is very reactionary. It is also very medically oriented, which means you cannot have one of us sitting anywhere. And this is where my transition came from, supporting the UN staff, supporting people who had been in peacekeeping mission, and recognizing that the elements from a clinical perspective do not take care of the 360-degree dimensional part. So if you talk about currently, it would depend on where you are standing. If you're sitting with AMISOM, as my brother Kareem has very well put together, AMISOM is not in a space to recognize it now. That idea of demystification and stigma and looking at the different levels of stigma, I believe, has much to do with it. Because leadership is key. We are only here because leadership made this happen. Yeah. If leadership did not see this as useful enough to become a topic area, we wouldn't be here. So where does advocacy start? We heard a lot of top down, top bottom up, and let me not get very technical, because in my country, Kenya, that's a huge political thing for our elections. So you're either in the top bottom or you're in the bottom up. Huh? And so in here, can we walk and chew gum at the same time? So now there's a huge thing for us who stepped into leadership development and management, polarity thinking. Sure. Are we able to actually say we are not equipped to really take on all that we need to take on from some of the aspects of things? We are not able to do this mental health and psychosocial support in its purity. But can we, in whatever is available, really be able to upskill, train, scale the resources that exist, and move away from a Western construct? And I think that's what really makes it difficult for us to buy in. Because what has been given to us, even in my training, might not always be applicable with half of the people who sit there. But we understand it. People know it. So currently, there are these two different spaces, but the opportunities, like Frederica says, are massive. But how do we want to benchmark that without policies in place, without the standard operating procedures in place? And I will not finish this without giving a shout out to some key people who are the genesis to why we're here. Because
Kiridi,
without that...
Because of time, we'll do that later.
Oh, that'll be lovely.
Yes,
but this
let's
is
do
where
that later.
I will get there because it strings into another thing when we talk about national and regional.
Okay.
Is really looking at, number one, there's General I.M. Yusuf, who's very up there now. If we had not come to Kofi Annan as a colonel and decided psychosocial counseling is important, sourced someone, and that someone happened to be me 12 years ago, who started pushing a narrative like Dr. Philip had said, keep on talking, keep on asking, bring it into that space, and you disseminate it in the way it works. And then we move on and Hannes walks in, and you get Hannes, and Hannes says, well, I think I can take this agenda. General Lafore removes the agenda. So let's look at this as not that one biological ill health mental space.
Thank you very much, Kirindi. That was extensive. Karim, from your experience and then previous submissions, what collaboration would you recommend for maximizing MHPSS in PSO?
I mean, the opportunity for collaboration is very immense. Within the African Union, we actually have a collaborative approach in place, particularly with the United Nations and the European Union. When Zino was talking, he referenced the fact that the UN provides logistical support to AMISOM. And part of those logistical support includes a number of things. Frederica mentioned some of them in terms of providing even the opportunity to worship, recreational facilities, provision of internet facilities. So we have a memorandum of understanding with the European Union. We have memorandum of understanding with the United Nations to provide these support to the African Union, to the mission in Somalia. And beyond that as well is the fact that the AU is relatively new in peace support operation when you compare us with the UN. UN has ages, decades of experience. As all these things have evolved, the UN have learned lessons from the experiences they've had, and therefore we in the African Union, we can leverage on their experience, and we don't have to suffer what the UN mission suffered 30 years ago. We need to be able to learn from the UN and take the process further. So, and the UN, to be fair, has been always willing to support the African Union in that regard. So I think the opportunity to learn from the UN is there, the opportunities to collaborate with the UN and other partners, and is there. So it's just for the African Union to leverage on that and ensure that we don't suffer what our predecessor peacekeepers suffered decades ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karim. Now, Kirindi, what could we do to minimize or prevent the impact of PSO on our personnel, especially for pre, during, and post deployment?
Okay, if we look at AMISOM, some countries are doing it.
Sure.
Okay, so you've got countries like Kenya that make certain things mandatory. Zambia, I know for sure, do not send out their troops without some kind of pre-intervention. So number one, even before deployment, who are you deploying? Are you deploying an officer who is able within their space and within their ecosystem to withstand the kind of environment that they're going into? And I think in selection, like you would do in any other kind of selection process, are you selecting a candidate because they want to be there or because they can be there? And I think these are questions we need to start looking at what the corporate world does and the civilian world, and start using some of the same mechanisms to see if people are ready to go. And if they're not ready, that doesn't mean that they don't go. But when you hold them back, how do you do your resilience building? You have a concept like stress inoculation. How are they leveraging on aspects of this to be able to make sure that the person being deployed can? This means you've got to do some level of assessment, you've got to domesticate your assessments, you've got to also make them relevant to the ground. When they are on mission, what are you doing? Are you now reconstituting the resources that are there, and is the complementarity being utilized, as Karim has talked about, so that if you don't have the resource to be able to support them, are you using the resources that exist? Now something, and I'm glad Dr. Philip is here, because I will not massacre your last name. I tried and it's not coming out. So, you know, when you have people with this kind of visionary spaces who already went into the Lake Chad area and decided that they're going to work from the ground, and I think, was it Pauline from Oxfam, was talking about your first responder is a local person. Yeah. So prior to coming into spaces, what can you do? And I think that was something that they took an initiative to do in MHPSS training, long before anybody else, long before the training curriculum. So how are we being visionary? How are we looking from a conscious place to decide what instruments exist? Not every country is going to be able to do MHPSS and understand, because our stigma levels are different. And now working with our research partners and looking at what other local CSOs exist, we can then come up as a PSO place. And I think this is silos. There was a lot spoken about working in silos. If we can create the synergies that are required, then our interventions exist. You can Google an intervention today. Whether that intervention is going to then translate to utilization is the problem.
Thank you very much, Kirindi. So you talked about the role of the individual national actors, right? Now, Karim, I would love you to add your voice on the role of national and regional actors in implementing MHPSS.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And I'll start from what Kurindi just said. She said previously, and to what she said again, that she said previously that our intervention tend to be medical based. And that the need for MHPSS ought to start even at the pre-deployment stage. Now, in terms of what the national actors need to do, the starting point is that the national actors must recognize the fact that they will be the ultimate beneficiary, in quote, of the mental health issue that may arise from sending their troops into the mission area. Therefore, I will argue that they have the primary responsibility to ensure that before they deploy, they look into the issue of mental health. When we, for example, presently within the AU system, and I think in the UN system as well, we have what we call the pre-deployment training, and we have what we call the pre-deployment visit. Those visits look at the physical. We will look at the soldier and say, okay, is this guy suffering from inherent condition? He's not suffering from inherent condition. He can go into the mission. That's why I said we are looking at it from the medical point of view. We are not looking at the psychological aspect. I don't know whether we can go to the extent of what Akirindi is talking about, whether the individual is actually willing to go, especially in the context of the armed forces. But the important thing is that, which I agree with her, is that those are the things we need to be looking at before we deploy into the mission. So the role of the national actor is to ensure that when you, for example, in our MOU with TCC, we said that you would deploy with recreational facilities into the mission. You would deploy with certain things into the mission. But unfortunately, due to lack of resources and capabilities, most of these troops deployed into Somalia with no recreational facility. So you have a soldier of about 5,000 troops spread in about 6 FOBs with no gym facilities, no equipment. These are guys who don't benefit from the R&R that Zeno mentioned. These guys are deployed into Somalia for 12-month period. They don't go home. They don't visit their wives. They don't visit their families, and they don't have access to even recreational facilities. So I think the responsibilities is twofold. It's between the mandating authorities and like the AU, and then the national authorities, because ultimately it is the national authorities who will feel the brunt of the soldiers who return into the mission. I can tell you, when we've done some, through our board of inquiry, we know that countries, our capitals, and our academies are full of soldiers who are actually suffering from a lot of PTSD. So those are the responsibility of the national actors to ensure that they prepare their troops. When the troops are in the mission, they look after them. When the troops return to the countries, they have to look at post-mission intervention to see who needs further follow-up. Without that, we are having we are actually creating a huge mental health issue for our countries.
Karim, please don't run away. Quickly add the support of what the role of CSOs and non-state actors. Then we can engage audience as well.
The CSOs, as we all know, they have the capacity to advocate for change they require, and therefore, from that point of view, the role of the CSOs is very important. And I will put their roles in two specific contexts. The first context is for the CSOs to use the power of advocacy to demystify, as you put it, the issue of mental health of people. I'm happy that Frederica referred to the issue of the Osaka, who sought to demystify it. The CSOs in the African capitals should engage in the demystification of mental health issues. There was an incident in 2018 in Somalia where the mayor of the Mogadishu was killed in a room like this. A suicide bomber blown herself up and killed the mayor, and a lot of people died. There was an individual in that office who is a staff of AMISOM, and when we made effort to send her for psychosocial support, and she said, "No, I don't want. I'm fine. I don't want people to think I'm crazy." So CSOs can use their power to do that. And the second angle is that they could put pressure and advocate on government to ensure that they discharge their responsibilities, their duty of care to the soldiers and troops they send into the mission area. Thank you.
Can I just add one bit there? I think there just needs to be a policy. If we've managed to put policies around gender, if we've managed to put policies around human security, we don't need to go the same route when we know what exists on the ground. And I think making it a more widespread thing so that it is mainstreamed into different arenas, not just the health. It's not look at reactionary illness models. Let's look at wellness models and the SDGs and what WHO mandates every country to do. I think these things must be held to account within the organizations.
Thank you very much. So I think Karim mentioned that there are existing documents. So we need to activate these documents just to add to what you said. So my audience, we've been, in the last 30 minutes, we've been looking at issues of psychosocial and mental health concerning our PSO personnel. We have looked at interventions and the role of stakeholders in enhancing psychosocial support for these personnel. Now I want to engage our guests here and those who are on our virtual platform as well. Please, any questions, any contributions, any comments, we invite from please, yeah. Commandant is on the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Joanna. Karim made reference to troops deployed in the field without R&R, rest and recreation facilities and all of that. But let me make an intervention from my personal experiences. I deployed with troops in South Lebanon. And for us, it used to be deployment for 6 months with UN, UNIFIL. And within the 6 months, you were required, or you had opportunity to either travel across into Israel for the Christians or to visit any other locations for a certain period. Now, it happens that UN has made rotation over 6 month period was quite a challenge for UN. It's now been extended to 1 year tour of duty. And so besides having the opportunity to probably move into other areas within the mission, to to rest and recuperate, if you like. In Ghana, there's also an opportunity for every soldier to be given a ticket to fly home for leave. And it becomes compulsory. You don't take the money and put it in your pocket and ship it to your wife for shopping, I guess. So it happens, but sometimes it depends on the member state.
Okay.
And so for Karim, those of you out there in the field, it behoves on you to ensure that these things are done. You talked about pre-deployment training and inspection and whatever. When you have to do the pre-deployment inspection, make sure that these recreational things, Ludo, draft, all of those things, gym equipment, all of that, if they are not items that could be carried along, there's funding for the contingent commanders to be able to institutionalize those things in the field. And the onus is on you. So sometimes when it's with the TCC, there's opportunity. But when you have experts like military observers who are on their own, or police experts, it becomes virtually the responsibility of the mission to be able to support, because they don't belong to any of the contingents, so to speak. And so that's my little contribution.
Thank you very much, Commandant. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I take the points you made, and actually, we are doing it in AMISOM. The welfare, the AMISOM Staff Welfare and Recreation Committee. What we've done in the absence of the contingent coming in with their gym equipment is that we've actually made funds available, and we've bought gyms spread across some of our FOBs and our sector headquarters. But I just wanted to make the point that our capitals are not discharging their requisite mandate. Unfortunately, in AMISOM, other than the civilian, the military staff officers, and the police IPOs, the military, the soldiers, and the FPUs, they are not allowed, unless there was an emergency, they stay in the mission for 12 months, which I think is way too long for every human. We always think that these soldiers are superhuman. They are not. They are just like you and I. They have blood flowing in their vein, and we need to reconsider that. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much for the contributions. Now we have some comments in the chat room. So from Dr. Cecil Oyonu, he said, advocacy on mental health must be prioritized and made an integral part of deployment to take care of the deficit we face now. Looking at the statistics given by Frederick, we have a lot of work to do. Indeed, the stress, traumas, etc. would be very expensive or costly to us in the near future if not managed now. Then Khadija said, how about changing the stigma and mental health issues across continents? A lot of times people will not admit that they may be dealing with mental health issues. How do we change the mindset? How about, okay, I think it's a repetition. Kirindi, will you take that for us?
I think number one, breaking down stigma. We've always taken stigma as one big pot. Stigma has so many levels, including self-stigma.
Sure.
So it's not always a stigma projected outwards. The stigma is projected within. And when we live on stereotypes, as we do in very patriarchal spaces, of course, it is difficult to do that. However, we can leverage on technology. We're not leveraging on technology enough to be able to keep us invisible, in a sense, for the people who cannot step up to be visible. What are we doing within these institutions to try and upscale the way we communicate or the way we get data? I know organizations I support who do anonymous every end of the week. And now with COVID, there's a lot of resources out there. So COVID has been a multiplier, but COVID has also offered a lot of tools that we can actually sit and use and adapt. We don't need to reinvent the wheel at all.
Thank you very much, Kirindi. Okay, so from Frederica in the chat room, she says policies are one step, but without a broad awareness and sensitization and destigmatization, those policies will not affect change. I think that reiterates Kirindi's point. Then Dr. Cecil again said, I agree, mental health awareness is a step in the right direction. Our live audience, please, any question, any contribution, comments? Okay, then I'll take another comments in the chat room. Pre and post counseling should be made available for everyone sent on the mission. Their lives should be prioritized and they should be rotated and not kept for too long in the conflict setting. Thank you very much.
Let me just add something. The fact that some countries are doing it, I know I spoke to the military psychologist who deploys into the multinational joint task force, and I had time to interview with her. They do it. If Kenya does it, and we know Zambia because I've talked to people do it. These mandated things that Karim is saying, we need to put it across the board. They go to the same place, so why are some getting advantage over others in terms of how they're presenting themselves? So can we have one level playing field that we accept that everybody is going to be troubled? You don't need to be Nigerian, Kenyan, or Zambian to be troubled. You will go into a very VUCA environment, as we call it. How do we position you for that in the best way we know how?
Thank you. Kirindi, don't go. So you wanted to mention some actors. Can you do that now?
Oh, I did. I mean, I think, you know, this has been, at least for me, a personal 12-year journey with the center, really trying to position this space. And I think really, you know, sometimes they do say it's just timing, isn't it? Because somehow, Hannes sits next to me at lunch when he comes in 2018, and I have always said it to everybody. He takes it on, it seems to understand it. And somewhere along that journey as well, there are the AU with Kenabochi leading this as well. And General Ofori happens to be the one there. And I must mention, General, you were my desk mate. So you know, having met him in a course years ago, sometimes it's just alignment and timing, but can we fast track some of the things we need? Because not a single person in this room hasn't had some psychosocial challenge and doesn't know people with mental health challenges. So why we talk about it like something that doesn't exist, like our skin, is something that we need to come and interrogate. And sometimes, like I say, make it blind. Just put it there. No one liked gender. Now KATPC has a gender policy. How many years after I began there? So these things will happen. We just need to start the journey, like Dr. Phillips said. We need to start at some point, and it will be absorbed. So this is the beginning, and really congratulations to everybody who put this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The conversation will continue. Looks like we don't have much time, but in the last 45 minutes or so, we've been discussing mental health. I would want to reiterate the fact that our mental health matters. The mental health of our PSO personnel matters even more. So we should continue with the conversations on our various platforms and contribute. Okay, we have some time. Okay, then I have some question. We have some few minutes to go. I have some questions. Frederick, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. So since we don't have our audience contributing, I have some questions on my bill. So you have been conducting research, right? We know that research is a very important tool in identifying problems and then building interventions. What is the role of research in this conversation?
I think that's a brilliant question. I just wanted to say, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, there are some comments in the chat as well, if you can maybe just have a look at them. I think that's a really important question, Joanna, because I think understanding what is and what already exists is really important. So whether that's the policies that Ramon Karim was speaking about earlier on, whether that is context-specific solutions that exists in different countries that one could look at, understand, and then potentially amplify, looking at what has worked in other countries. Yeah, sure, we can look at what has happened in countries you've mentioned, I think, Joanna, or even if it was Ramon speaking about countries in Europe that have sort of somewhat more sophisticated approaches to these things. looking at that and making sure that we know what is available, I think is really, really important. And then continually reviewing and updating the documents that we do have. Making sure that some of the policies that we have are potentially expanded upon. I know, for instance, the African Union Transitional Justice Policy, in my personal view, doesn't quite do justice to MHPSS in terms of really sustainably and holistically addressing issues not just pertaining to women and children, which is something that I feel the policy overly addresses, but looking at it as a holistic societal issue and understanding how violent conflict disrupts social fiber. So, just reviewing what we have, building on that, and then beginning to build a body of evidence that says, if we integrate MHPSS into our peace building efforts, into our peace support operations, that it's about building the case. And I think the one thing that hasn't really come up is funding for these issues. We need more funding for it. And for that, we'll need a convincing argument to those who don't speak our language to say, we need more resources to be able to fund this, whether it's a gym in one of the AMISOM missions, or whether it's deploying psychosocial counselors along with missions or whatever. So I think it must be an absolute priority, and I think it's great that you raise that question. And it must go hand in hand with dialogues and conversations and exchanges with individuals who are already doing this work. Because as Karindi's pointed out, there are a lot of amazing initiatives happening across the continent, not just in terms of missions, but also, institutes, NGOs, think tanks around the continent looking at that sort of nexus between health and peace, and all of that I think can contribute significantly to moving us field forward. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much. So we'll take, there's no name, but I think the point is important. This guest says, I wonder how much we are dedicated to that is MHPSS. Often it is spoken, but not supported with action. Also, one must pay attention for the role media play in this. Here too, there is no or little effort. It starts with streamlining it as well as using it as one of the strategic pillars. It needs budgets. It needs policy. What would you comment on that? Kiridi, will you take that for us?
I'll take that coming from Her Excellency Tete. Listen, the reality is, pardon me if I offend anyone, it's just not sexy enough a topic, all right? And that has been present right from this fight. I mean, being in the fight, being in the trenches, trying to position this, it just isn't. Guns make more sense. Troops make more sense. Going out there and really working with insurgencies makes more sense in terms of the political. And we're not going to kid ourselves. You grow up. I've grown up in Kofi Annan. 12 years later, my idealistic thinking that, Karim, if you'd met me 12 years ago, you wouldn't even be able to have that discussion. But becoming more practical and more pragmatic about where the money goes. Now, it'll take that one-on-one engagement. It'll take a lot of really being able to sit and get the listening ear of those, just as that's happened. It's not going to ever get the kind of money. So how do we now start working within the funds we have so that we're not reinventing the wheel? We already have a training. How do we just get a little more capacity building to the pre-deployment training that's there? Don't try and get your own training. Work with what is in existence and scale that. That's the way I look at it, and I think that way we might achieve something, rather than try and have it as a standalone.
Thank you very much. So we'll take another comment from Halifa. He says, just to add to what the commandant said, countries like mine, Senegal, have adjusted their deployment to those new challenges by training psychologists, medical officers, to accompany the troops before deployment and while there. Special cases like repatriated soldiers are thus taken care of when back home. I think that's a good comment. That's relevant to us. Okay. Okay, there's another one from Yasmin. So Lieutenant Colonel Yasmin from Pakistan, serving at UNMISS. I would like to add one positive point observed in UNMISS during my 11-month tenure of duty. Every Rwandan contingent on rotation here is accompanied by their own psychologist at L1 clinic, in addition to 2 times medical officers and 6 times paramedical staff. Okay. I think it's worth learning from. So that is the point. There's a repetition there, but the point is that they go with their own medical and psychologists, medical officers and psychologists to support them. We can, like Karindi said, we can learn from these existing structures. Don't forget to involve from Nadia. Don't forget to involve case managers, that is social workers. They are key actors in my view. Don't forget to involve, okay, it's a repetition. I'm wondering why, okay. Social workers, so Ada said, social workers should also be trained to support the team in the field. Yes, in the field. Okay, so I think they are reiterating the previous point.
I think, Joanna,
No
just to
more.
go with that point, the training that is being set up at the Kofi Annan, I mean, it's the first training in Africa that is there. And if you look at the kind of mix of people that we had, each one of those becomes a champion. Each one of those becomes a mentor of sorts because they have a vestibular of knowledge to be able to walk. Now, you might not be able to have a social worker, that's an additional fee, but you have an HR officer. You have somebody else who's in charge. You've got your commanders. They hold that case management role. So that whole peer support element is vital. We don't need to have an expert walk with them. Sure. And again, we want to flatten it. We don't want to make it such a vertical kind of issue. We want to make it an issue that everybody holds alongside them so that they can actually be a channel and a resource for the next person.
Thank you very much. Karim, you wanted to say something?
I think what I was going to say has just been answered by, just been said by Dr. Kirindi, that reiterating what the SRSG say, that we are going to be operating in a immensely tight funding environment, and therefore we need to be exceedingly creative. The COVID-19, as Kirindi also said, is giving us a challenge, but giving us an opportunity. And therefore, we could leverage on the existing support that we have. The idea of the peer helper is actually particularly helpful because we could have, within AMISON, what we're trying to do is to actually train some people as peer helpers who would then be able to provide perhaps not professional counseling, but some level of counseling to their colleagues within the mission area. And I also take the point made by Kurinda that those who are trained, they could be multipliers, they could be enablers, because once they are trained, they return to their countries and then take the job and be the champions. And like Federico said, maybe we need a more well-known figure to act as the champion. But those who have been trained could also equally become the champions for MH PSS in the current climate.
Federico, any comments, please?
No, thanks, Joanna. I'm just excited that we're having this conversation, and I think it's the beginning of hopefully something that will continue, whether it's through another meeting like this focused exclusively on this topic, or a research agenda funded by the AU. I think some great ideas were raised today, and I look forward to be part of them.
Great. So thank you very much. Would want to thank KATPC and IPSS for giving us this platform, and also GIZ for sponsoring us to be able to have this all-important conversation. coming to an end, just to wrap up, we have looked at the issues PSO personnel face at the PSO environment. We have looked at the interventions available and the role of stakeholders in improving the mental health and psychosocial needs of our PSO personnel. Like I mentioned, our mental health matters. So we've heard a lot. We all should take our mental health in our hands and continue the conversations on different platforms and wherever you find yourself. Like Kirindi mentioned, we are all advocates now. Advocate for mental health for personnel in the PSO environment. So let's give the needed support that in our own capacity to these personnel. Thank you very much, my panelists, for the insightful contributions you've given this evening. Please, can we thank them with a round of applause? We wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the program. We hope that this workshop has been an opportunity to deeply understand the HDP nexus and MHPSS concepts and explore options for their inclusion in existing initiatives and policies of the African Union and other stakeholders and their meaningful implementation in Africa, among others. We will share outcomes of this meeting in the coming days. So please stay tuned to our social media. We'll also share with all of you a short post-event online survey. So I kindly ask you to complete it. It will help us assess the event and improve it as we go along. At last, I would like to thank all our welcome and opening remark speakers for their valuable time and invaluable inputs, and also for the panelists. I would also like to thank GIZ for all the support, IPSS and KATPC's leadership as well for their endless support and being with us and making this workshop a success. I would also like to thank Spectacle Events and Sheraton for the services they have provided. And also I would like to thank all participants who've joined us here in person and online for staying us from the beginning until the end. I would like to announce that this workshop is officially closed, and have a wonderful evening and afternoon. Thank you very much.